Marcus Bellini grabbed Evelyn's wrist so hard she felt the bones grind together. He pulled her close, his breath hot against her face, and smiled the way men smile when they believe they are completely untouchable. "Listen to me very carefully, fat girl." His voice was barely above a whisper. "You are furniture in this house. Furniture does not speak. Furniture does not ask questions. Furniture does not exist." He released her wrist with a shove that sent her stumbling backward into the wall. "The next time you walk into a room where men are talking, I will make sure Adrian sends you back to your worthless father in pieces." Nobody stopped him. Nobody said a word. Every man in that hallway looked away, and Evelyn Carter stood up straight, smoothed her dress, and looked Marcus Bellini directly in the eyes without blinking. She did not speak. She simply remembered everything. Every witness, every man who chose silence. She would remember all of it. If this story already has you feeling something, please subscribe to our channel right now and follow every part of this journey to the very end. Drop a comment below and tell me what city you are watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story has traveled. Now let us go back to where it all truly began. The morning of her wedding, Evelyn Carter sat alone in a small room at the back of St. Patrick's Cathedral and did not cry. She had promised herself she would not cry. Not because she was not afraid, she was terrified. But she had learned something a long time ago from her father, in the years when he still had his dignity and his sense in his soul. He used to say that the most dangerous thing a person could do in a room full of wolves was show them your throat. So Evelyn sat straight, hands folded in her lap, and breathed the way he had taught her to breathe. Slow, even controlled. The ivory dress they had fitted to her body was not meant to make her beautiful. She understood that the moment she saw the designer's face, when he measured her waist. He smiled too politely. He said things like classic and timeless and elegant in a way that meant he was trying not to say the other things. The dress was built to minimize, to compress, to make Evelyn Carter take up as little space as possible on the most important day of her life. She wore it anyway, because Evelyn Carter had spent 28 years learning how to exist inside spaces that were not built for her. One more dress was not going to break her. Her maid of honor, a cousin named Patricia, who had agreed to stand beside her more out of family obligation than genuine love, knocked twice and entered the room without waiting. "They're ready for you," Patricia said. She was looking at her phone. Evelyn stood up without being asked twice. "How do I look?" she asked. Patricia glanced up. Something moved across her face. Pity, maybe. Or discomfort. The kind of expression people make when they want to be kind, but do not actually know how. "You look fine," Patricia said. "You look perfectly fine." Fine, that word had followed Evelyn her entire life. Not beautiful, not striking, not the kind of woman men turned to look at when she walked into a room. Fine, acceptable, manageable. She thought about that word as she walked down the aisle. She thought about her father. Thomas Carter had been a brilliant man once. Truly brilliant. He could read a financial statement the way musicians read sheet music, with total fluency, hearing things in the numbers that most people could not even see. He had built a quiet, respectable career as an accountant and financial manager, and for years, that career had been enough to give Evelyn and her mother a comfortable life. Private school, a modest house in Connecticut, summers at the Cape. Then he got greedy, or maybe it was not greed exactly. Maybe it was desperation dressed up as ambition. The Valenti family had come to Thomas Carter 5 years earlier, not with a gun to his head, but with something more dangerous, an opportunity. They needed someone brilliant and discreet to manage the financial architecture of their legitimate business holdings, and Thomas Carter was exactly the kind of man who could do it. Brilliant enough to find the holes. Honest enough that no one suspected him of looking. For 2 years, Thomas did exactly what he was paid to do. Then the market turned, and he made a decision he could not take back. He moved money. Not to steal it, he told himself. To protect it. To invest it temporarily and return it before anyone noticed. He believed he was smarter than the market. He believed he could fix the mistake before it became a catastrophe. He was wrong. By the time Evelyn learned the full truth, her father had lost nearly $4 million of Adrian Valenti's money, and the men who came to their house in Connecticut on a Tuesday evening in February were not there to negotiate. They were there to collect. Thomas Carter had offered many things that night. His savings, the house. His retirement accounts. Everything he had was less than half of what he owed, and the men in dark suits who sat across from him in the living room made it very clear that the Valenti family did not accept partial payments. And then Thomas Carter made the worst decision of his life. He offered his daughter, not as payment for the debt. He was careful about the language, even years later, when Evelyn made him repeat the story to her face. He called it a marriage proposal, a union between families, a way to bring the Carters into the Valenti world so that the debt became something more personal, more lasting, more manageable. He said Adrian was a powerful man who needed a stable wife. He said Evelyn was smart and capable and would be good in that role. He did not ask Evelyn first. He called her the next morning and told her what had already been decided. Evelyn had stood in her kitchen in Brooklyn, holding her phone, listening to her father's voice explain the arrangement with the careful, apologetic tone of a man who knew he had done something monstrous but needed her to accept it anyway. She said 3 words, "I'll be there." She hung up. She sat down at her kitchen table. She stared at the wall for a long time. Then she opened her laptop and started researching Adrian Valenti. Because that was what Evelyn Carter did when she was afraid. She worked. She gathered information. She understood her enemy before she walked into the room. And what she found in those weeks of quiet, careful research told her everything she needed to know. Adrian Valenti was not a man who had been born into power. He had fought for every inch of it. His father, Dominic Valenti, had run the family's operations for 30 years with a combination of brute force and street-level loyalty. When Dominic died of a heart attack in 1981, Adrian was 29 years old and surrounded by older, more experienced men who assumed they would be the ones to fill the vacuum. Adrian had proven them wrong within 18 months. He was not the biggest man in the room. He was not the loudest. He did not use fear the way his father had, like a blunt instrument. Adrian used intelligence. He outmaneuvered people. He saw 4 moves ahead. He let men underestimate him right up until the moment he closed the door on them. Evelyn recognized that quality immediately. She also recognized something that none of the newspaper articles or federal reports or FBI surveillance summaries she found ever talked about directly. Adrian Valenti was surrounded by people who served him, but he was not surrounded by people who were honest with him. That was the gap. That was the crack in the wall. She was still thinking about that crack when she reached the altar. Adrian Valenti was taller than the photograph suggested. He stood straight in his dark suit, with the kind of posture that comes from years of being the most important person in every room. And when Evelyn came to stand beside him, he turned and looked at her with eyes that were calm and empty and completely unreadable. She looked back. She did not look away. Something crossed his face. Not attraction, not warmth. Something more like surprise. As if he had expected her to crumble under the weight of his gaze and was mildly confused that she had not. The priest began. Adrian leaned slightly toward her. His voice was a low, flat murmur, not meant for anyone else to hear. "Don't make my life harder than it already is." Evelyn kept her eyes forward. "I have no intention of doing that," she said. "Good. I have every intention of making your life more useful." He turned to look at her. She was already looking at the priest. The ceremony continued. The reception was held at the Valenti family estate in Westchester, a property so large and so carefully maintained that it looked more like a country club than a private home. Evelyn sat at the head table and ate the meal that was placed in front of her and smiled when she was supposed to smile and shook hands with men who could not quite look her in the eye and women who could not quite stop looking at her dress. She cataloged every face, every name that was said near her, every conversation that happened just far enough away that the speakers assumed she could not hear. Marcus Bellini sat 3 tables away with 2 other men Evelyn did not yet know, and he laughed twice during the first hour, in a way that made the other men laugh too, and each time he laughed, his eyes moved briefly to Evelyn. She did not react. She kept her face pleasant and calm and completely still, but she memorized his face. He was in his early 50s, Marcus Bellini, heavy through the chest and shoulders, gray at the temples. He wore his suit like a man who had been wearing expensive suits for decades, with total ease, as if the fabric had grown there. He had the handshake of a man who wanted you to know how strong he was, and the eyes of a man who was always measuring the distance between where he was and where he wanted to be. Adrian trusted him completely. That was obvious from the way the other men deferred to Marcus when Adrian was not in the room, the way they waited for Marcus to speak first, the way conversations seemed to organize themselves around his presence. Adrian had built his empire on intelligence, but he had made the oldest mistake in the book. He trusted the man closest to him. Evelyn watched Marcus for 3 hours that night. At the end of the 3rd hour, she saw something she was not supposed to see. Marcus left the reception through a side door. He did not go to the bathroom. He did not go outside for air. He walked with purpose, checking twice over his shoulder, and disappeared into the east wing of the estate. Evelyn counted 60 seconds. Then she picked up her evening bag and walked in the same direction. She did not hurry. She did not sneak. She simply walked like a woman who owned the house and was going to retrieve something she had forgotten. The east wing was quieter. She moved through it slowly, trailing her fingers along the wall as if admiring the architecture. And she listened. Marcus's voice came through a partially closed door. She could not hear all of it. Enough, not sustainable. The longer we let him believe he's still in control, a second voice lower, unfamiliar. Timeline needs to move up. The Calabrese family is getting impatient, I know. I'm handling it. But I need you to keep them patient for 2 more months. After that, a pause. After that, there won't be a problem. Evelyn stood perfectly still. She committed every word to memory. Then she turned and walked back to the reception. She sat back down at the head table. She finished her meal. She danced one slow, formal dance with her new husband when the music changed, feeling his hand at the small of her back with all the warmth of a business handshake, and she smiled the appropriate smile. And when the dance was over, she thanked him politely. Adrian looked at her the way he had looked at her at the altar. That same flicker of surprise. You're not what I expected, he said. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. What did you expect? He considered the question more seriously than she anticipated. Someone who needed more from me, he said finally. I don't need anything from you, Mr. Valenti, she said. Adrian, I don't need anything from you, Adrian. She paused. But I think you may need something from me. You just don't know it yet. She walked away before he could answer. Behind her, she heard nothing. No laughter, no dismissal, silence. That was the first time Adrian Valenti had nothing to say. The first month in the Valenti mansion was the loneliest Evelyn had ever spent. Not because she was mistreated. She was not. The staff was professional and courteous. Her rooms were large and well-furnished. She had access to the estate's library, which turned out to be extraordinary, thousands of volumes organized by subject and era. She had a car and a driver whenever she needed them. She wanted for nothing material. But the mansion was also a machine, and Evelyn was not part of the machine. She was a piece of furniture, decorative, stationary, existing in the spaces between the real movements of the household without actually participating in any of them. Adrian came home late and left early. When they ate together, which was rarely, he was polite in the way that strangers are polite when they are stuck together in an elevator. Correct, minimal. Not unkind, but completely absent in any way that mattered. His lieutenants, when they came to the estate for meetings, did not speak to Evelyn directly. They spoke around her, past her, through her, as if she were a piece of furniture that had inexplicably developed the ability to pass the bread at dinner. The only person who spoke to Evelyn with any genuine warmth in those early weeks was a woman named Rosa, who had been the estate's housekeeper for 11 years, and who had the particular quality of total honesty that comes from a lifetime of watching powerful people be foolish in private. They don't know what to do with you, Rosa told her one morning, pouring coffee in the kitchen with the matter-of-fact directness of someone who had stopped performing politeness decades ago. I know, Evelyn said. The last woman Mr. Valenti was involved with lasted 4 months. She wanted to be part of the world, you understand? She wanted to attend the meetings. She wanted to give opinions. She lasted 4 months before she packed and left. I'm not going anywhere, Evelyn said. Rosa looked at her for a long moment. No, she said slowly. I don't think you are. What Rosa did not know, what no one in the household knew, was that Evelyn had already begun. She had done it quietly, the way she did everything. She had made a list in her head of everything she needed to understand about the Valenti organization, and she had begun methodically working through it. The legitimate businesses first. Adrian maintained a network of real, functioning companies, restaurants and construction firms, and 2 mid-sized hotels that served both as genuine revenue sources and as channels for moving money through the financial system in ways that were difficult to trace. Evelyn understood this architecture immediately because her father had built much of it, and she had spent weeks reading his original documents before she ever came to the estate. She asked Adrian, casually, over breakfast one morning, whether she might help with the bookkeeping for one of the restaurants. Just to stay occupied, she said. Just have something useful to do. He looked up from his newspaper. You know accounting? My father taught me, she said, which was true. He considered this briefly. The Venezia on 46th Street, he said. I'll have someone send you the files. The files arrived that afternoon. Evelyn spent 3 days reading every page. By the end of the 3rd day, she had found 2 separate anomalies that did not belong. Small ones. The kind of small that someone skilled and careful had worked very hard to make look like rounding errors or administrative inconsistencies. The kind of small that you only notice if you are looking for it. Evelyn was always looking for it. She made notes. She said nothing. She requested the files for the second restaurant, then the third, then the construction company. She moved carefully. She took her time. She never asked for more than seemed reasonable for someone simply trying to stay occupied and feel useful. And while the men who passed through the Valenti estate continued to look through her and past her and around her, Evelyn Carter was building a picture of the empire that was more complete than anything Adrian's own accountants had produced. By the end of the second month, the picture was clear enough to frighten her. Someone was stealing from Adrian Valenti, not a little, not opportunistically, systematically, carefully. Over a period of what she estimated was at least 2 years, significant sums had been quietly redirected from the organization's revenue streams through a series of shell accounts and dummy vendors that were invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. The amounts were large enough to fund something serious. The architecture was sophisticated enough to require someone with real access, someone who understood the organization's financial infrastructure from the inside. There were not many people who fit that description. Evelyn sat with this knowledge for a week before she began the next stage of her investigation. She needed to be certain. She needed more than numbers. She needed to understand where the money was going. She started by requesting the guest logs for the Venezia restaurant, framing it as a desire to understand customer patterns for scheduling purposes. No one questioned her. She was the boss's wife doing something domestic and harmless. The log showed her what she needed. Marcus Bellini had dined at the Venezia 14 times in the past 8 months, usually late, usually with 1 or 2 other men whose names were not in the reservation system, which meant they had come as his guests, which meant their names had never been recorded. Evelyn requested the security footage archive for the restaurant's dining room, again with a harmless explanation about a property insurance review. It took her 4 days to get it. She watched 60 hours of footage over the course of a week, sitting at the desk in her private office with the door locked, taking handwritten notes in a system she had developed herself over years of working with sensitive financial information. She found what she was looking for in hour 37. Marcus Bellini at a corner table, leaning forward, talking with 2 men whose faces she did not immediately recognize. But she could read body language. She could read the geography of the table, who sat with their back to the wall, who faced the room, who was being briefed, and who was doing the briefing. Marcus was running the meeting. She took still photographs from the footage using a small camera she had purchased herself, without asking anyone for help. Then she spent 3 days identifying the 2 men. One of them was a lieutenant in the Calabrese family, the Valenti organization's most dangerous rival in the city. The other one she could not immediately place. She was still working on it when Adrian came home one night with a cut along his left cheekbone and blood on his collar, moving through the front door of the estate with the controlled, rigid precision of a man who was managing significant pain by sheer force of will. Evelyn met him in the hallway. He looked at her. "It was a minor incident," he said. "You need that cut clean," she said. "I have people." "Your people are still in the car," she said. "Sit down." He sat. She found the first aid kit in the kitchen and brought it back and cleaned the cut herself, working carefully and efficiently, and Adrian sat very still and let her do it, which told her more about his state of mind than anything he could have said. When she was done, she looked at him directly. "Someone tried to kill you tonight," she said. It was not a question. He looked at her for a long moment. "What makes you say that?" "Because a minor incident doesn't bring you home looking like this," she said. "And because you came through the front door instead of the side entrance, which means whatever happened shook you enough that you forgot to be careful about being seen." His jaw tightened slightly. "You notice a lot of things," he said. "I notice everything," she said. "It's one of the things I'm good at." She reached under the desk in the hallway, where she had placed the folder 3 days ago, moving it each time she thought she was close to a conversation like this one. She had been ready for this moment longer than he knew. She set the folder on the table in front of him. He opened it. He was quiet for a long time. He went through every page, every photograph, every financial record, every annotated transaction with her handwritten notes in the margins explaining the connections she had traced. When he looked up, his face had changed, not softened. That was the wrong word for Adrian Valenti. Something had shifted. The emptiness in his eyes had been replaced by something much more alive and much more dangerous. "Where did you get this?" His voice was very quiet. "I built it," Evelyn said, "over the past 2 months. From the financial files you gave me access to, from restaurant logs, from security footage, from cross-referencing names and dates and patterns that nobody else was looking for because nobody thought I was capable of looking." Marcus, yes, you're certain. I'm not showing you a theory, she said. I'm showing you a case. Every document in that folder can be independently verified. I can walk you through the methodology if you want. He was quiet again. She gave him the silence. He's been with me for 12 years, Adrian said. I know, Evelyn said. That's why he was able to do it for 2. Another pause tonight, he said. The men who came at us tonight. Calabrese, she said. I believe so. Though I think they were hired by Marcus rather than acting on the family's direct orders. He's been using them as a tool, promising them something in return. Adrian closed the folder. He looked at her. For the first time since the altar, he truly looked at her, not through her, not past her, but directly at her with the full and focused attention of a man who was completely reassessing something he thought he had already understood. I thought I married someone I had to manage, he said. Evelyn met his gaze and held it. I know what you thought, she said. That's why I let you think it. The silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable. Something else. Something that felt for the first time in months like the beginning of something real. What do you need from me, he said. She looked at him steadily. Time, she said, and access. And the understanding that this doesn't end tonight. This is bigger than one man, and if we move wrong, we lose everything we know. He nodded once. And what do I get in return, he asked. Evelyn picked up her coffee cup. You get to stop wondering who's going to betray you next, she said. Because I'm going to help you make that impossible. She walked out of the hallway. Behind her, Adrian Valenti sat alone with the folder and the silence, and the slowly dawning understanding that everything he thought he knew about his own household had been wrong. The woman he had married to close a debt was not a liability. She had never been a liability, and now he knew it. The morning after Adrian saw the folder, nothing changed. That was the first thing Evelyn noticed. She had expected something, a conversation, a shift in how the staff addressed her, some small visible signal that the ground beneath the Valenti household had moved. But Adrian left the estate at 6:45 in the morning the same way he always did, without stopping by the kitchen where she was having coffee, without sending word through anyone, without any indication that the previous night had been anything other than ordinary. Evelyn finished her coffee and went to her office. She understood. A man like Adrian did not change course quickly. He had spent years building his instincts, and those instincts told him to verify before he moved, to be certain before he committed, to never let anyone see him adjust until he had already adjusted completely. He would not come to her immediately. He would spend days quietly confirming what she had given him. She was fine with that. She had more work to do anyway. The second man in the restaurant footage, the one she had not yet identified, had been sitting with Marcus and the Calabrese lieutenant with a posture that told her he was not subordinate to either of them. He held the table differently. He listened more than he spoke. And when he did speak, both Marcus and the Calabrese man leaned slightly forward. That man was the key to something larger. She was certain of it. She spent that first morning running his face through every resource she had access to, which was not extensive. She was not law enforcement. She did not have databases. What she had was the public record, the newspaper archives she had been quietly collecting for months, the social pages of New York publications from the past decade, the guest lists from charity events and business functions that the Valenti organization had attended in their legitimate capacity. She found him on the 43rd page of a 1,984 Chamber of Commerce annual dinner program. His name was Gerald Fitch. He was listed as a financial consultant representing a holding company called Meridian Group Partners. Evelyn stared at that name for a long time. Then she opened the Valenti organization's financial records and searched for Meridian Group Partners. It appeared 7 times across 4 different companies. All 7 appearances were in the past 26 months. All 7 were classified as consulting fees. None of them corresponded to any actual documented work product. Evelyn sat back in her chair and felt the cold, clear sensation that came when something very large came into focus all at once. Gerald Fitch was not just a middleman, he was the architect. Marcus was funneling Valenti money through Fitch's holding company, cleaning it and using it to finance whatever came next. And whatever came next involved the Calabrese family in a timeline that, based on what she had heard through that door on the night of the wedding, was already moving. She needed to know how far along the timeline was. She needed information she could not get from documents. She needed a person. The person she chose was the last one anyone would have expected her to approach. His name was Danny Ruiz, and he was 23 years old and worked as a driver for the Valenti organization, specifically as the man who drove the catering van for the Venezia restaurant on weekends. He was not a soldier. He was not in any inner circle. He was the kind of young man who exists at the absolute edge of a powerful organization, close enough to see things, far enough away that nobody ever worried about what he was seeing. Evelyn had noticed him on her third visit to the restaurant, when she had gone to review the bookkeeping in person. He had held the door for her without being asked and said good afternoon with genuine politeness, not the performed deference that the rest of the staff aimed at her, but actual human courtesy. She had filed that away. Now she used it. She arranged to be at the restaurant on a Saturday afternoon when Danny was finishing his shift, and she sat at the bar and ordered a coffee. And when he came through the kitchen door and saw her, she smiled and said, "Danny, isn't it? Will you sit with me for a minute?" He looked nervous immediately. "Mrs. Valenti, I don't think I should." "I'm not asking you to do anything that would put you at risk," she said quietly. "I'm asking you to have a cup of coffee with me and tell me one thing. That's all." He sat, his hands were restless on the table. "I need to know," she said, keeping her voice very calm and very low, "whether you have ever driven anyone other than restaurant staff or food supply in that van." Danny Ruiz looked at the table. The silence lasted about 4 seconds. 4 seconds was enough. "I drove 2 men to a warehouse in Red Hook," he said. "3 weeks ago, Mr. Bellini arranged it. He told me it was a supply pickup, but there was no supply. I waited outside for 40 minutes and then drove them back. Did you see who they met?" "I didn't go inside. Did you see any other vehicles?" He hesitated. 2 black cars," he said, "New Jersey plates." Evelyn nodded slowly. "Thank you, Danny." She left a $20 bill beside her coffee cup and walked out. Red Hook, 3 weeks ago, New Jersey plates. The Calabrese family's primary operations were based out of Newark. The timeline was not 2 months away. The timeline was already here. She was in her car, 2 blocks from the restaurant, when her phone rang. It was a number she did not recognize. She answered anyway. "Mrs. Valenti." The voice was male, measured, professional, not threatening in its tone, but chilling in the way that perfectly controlled voices are always chilling. "I think you have been asking some questions that are going to get you hurt. I'm calling as a courtesy. Stop now and nothing happens to you. Continue and I cannot promise your safety." Evelyn kept her voice completely steady. "Who is this?" "Someone who knows what you've been doing for the past 2 months, the voice said. "Someone who is giving you one opportunity to step back." "I appreciate the call," she said. "I want you to pass something back to whoever sent you. Tell them that the woman they're trying to frighten has already made copies of everything. Tell them the copies are not in this house and are not accessible to anyone connected to the Valenti organization or to them. Tell them that if anything happens to me, those copies go to 3 separate federal offices simultaneously." A pause. "Do you have all of that?" Silence. "I'll take that as a yes," she said. "Have a good evening." She hung up. Her hand was trembling slightly on the phone. She pressed it flat against her knee and breathed until it stopped. Then she drove home. She had been bluffing about the federal offices. She did not have copies distributed anywhere yet. But she was going to fix that tonight, because the phone call told her something critical. Marcus knew she was getting close, which meant she had days, not weeks. She walked into the estate and went directly upstairs, and spent 4 hours creating encrypted digital copies of every document, photograph, and financial record she had assembled, and she sent them to 2 secure email addresses she had created months earlier using computers at the New York Public Library, accounts that had no connection to her name or to any device in the Valenti household. She finished at 11:47 in the evening. At 11:52, she heard the door to the adjacent study open and close. Adrian was home. She waited. 15 minutes passed. Then there was a knock at her office door, not the knock of a man who expected to be refused. More like the knock of a man who was not entirely sure of his welcome and had decided to be courteous about it anyway. "Come in," she said. Adrian opened the door and stood in the frame. He had not changed from his work clothes. His jacket was off, his sleeves rolled up, and he looked like a man who had been having an extremely long day and had come home to have a longer conversation. He looked at the desk covered in papers and then at her. "You've been working," he said. "Always," she said. He came in and sat down in the chair across from her desk, which no one had ever done before. Every time anyone had come into this office, they had either stood near the door or leaned against the wall. No one had ever simply sat down across from her like a person with business to discuss. It felt significant. "I verified the financial records," he said. "And everything you showed me checks out." He was quiet for a moment. "I had my own accountant look at the same files independently, without telling him what to look for. He found 3 of the 7 discrepancies you identified. Took him 2 days. It took me 11 days the first time," Evelyn said. "I got faster." Something moved across Adrian's face. It might have been respect. Marcus has been with me since I took over, he said. He was one of the men who supported me when my father died. When the older lieutenants were pushing back, Marcus was the one who held the line. I know, she said. That's why he believed you would never suspect him. He was right, Adrian said. I wouldn't have. The honesty of that surprised her. There's something else, she said. She told him about Danny Ruiz and the warehouse in Red Hook. She told him about the New Jersey plates. She told him about Gerald Fitch and Meridian Group partners and the 7 consulting fees that corresponded to nothing. She did not tell him about the phone call. Not yet. She needed to understand something first. How many people in this organization know about the warehouse meeting, she asked. Adrian's expression sharpened. What do you mean? I mean that Marcus arranged that meeting through a driver who works for one of your legitimate businesses, she said carefully, which suggests he is not hiding his movements inside the organization anymore. He has moved past the stage where he needs to be invisible. He is in the execution phase. The room was very quiet. He's going to move soon, Evelyn said. I don't know exactly when, but I think we have days, not weeks. Adrian stood up. He walked to the window and stood with his back to her for a moment, and she could see in the line of his shoulders the weight of what she was telling him. Not the strategic calculation, the personal weight. 12 years. The man who had held the line when everyone else was pushing. What do you need from me? He said without turning around. I need you to behave exactly as you normally would, she said. I need Marcus to believe nothing has changed. If he senses that you know, he will accelerate everything, and we will lose control of the timing. And what are you going to do? I'm going to find out who made the phone call, she said. He turned around. What phone call? She told him. The expression on his face when she finished was one she had not seen from him before. It moved through several things in rapid succession: anger, something that was almost fear, and then something colder and more deliberate that settled over everything else like a lid closing on a pot. You should have told me immediately, he said. I needed to secure the documents first, she said. The documents are what matter. Without them, we have nothing. With them, we have everything. Someone threatened my wife, he said. His voice had dropped into a register that was very quiet and very dangerous. In my city, your wife handled it, Evelyn said evenly. And your wife needs you to stay focused, because we cannot afford to react emotionally right now. We need to be 3 steps ahead, and that means thinking, not feeling. He looked at her for a long moment. You sound like me, he said. I've been paying attention, she said. Something shifted between them in that moment, something subtle but real, like a door that had been stuck for months, finally easing open an inch. Not warmth exactly, not yet, but recognition, the particular recognition between 2 people who operate the same way and have just realized it about each other. He sat back down. Tell me what you think the full plan is, he said. All of it, so she told him. She laid it out the way she would lay out a financial analysis, methodically, beginning with what she could prove, and moving into what she could reasonably infer, being careful to distinguish between the 2 at every step. Marcus had spent 2 years quietly redirecting funds through Gerald Fitch's shell company. He had used that money to build a relationship with the Calabrese family, offering them something in return for their support in a transition of power. What he was offering them was almost certainly territory, specific parts of the Valenti organization's operations that Calabrese had wanted for years. The plan, as best she could reconstruct it, was to remove Adrian at a moment when the organization was already off balance, blame it on a rival family that was not Calabrese, use the resulting chaos to position Marcus as the stabilizing force, and then honor whatever agreement he had made with Calabrese in exchange for their backing during the transition. It's elegant, Adrian said quietly. It is, Evelyn agreed. He's been patient. 2 years is a long time to hold a plan together. And Fitch walks away with his consulting fees and a very clean record, she said. He's insulated from everything. Marcus is careful about that. Not careful enough, Adrian said. No, she said. Not careful enough. She watched him process it all, watched the way his mind worked through the implications, and she was struck again by the same thing she had noticed in her research before the wedding. Adrian Valenti was genuinely intelligent, not in the way that powerful men sometimes performed intelligence loudly, with the expectation of being admired for it, but quietly, structurally, the way engineers are intelligent, always looking at what holds things together and what makes them fall apart. There's a meeting, he said suddenly, next Thursday. Marcus arranged it. He said it was with suppliers from Chicago. I was going to have him handle it independently because I had a conflict. Cancel the conflict, Evelyn said immediately. He looked at her. If Marcus arranged a meeting and wants you absent, she said, that meeting is either the setup or it is directly connected to the setup. You need to know what it is before you decide how to use it. Or it might be the meeting where they try to take me out. Yes, she said. It might be. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than the ones they had shared before. This one had weight in it. It had the specific gravity of two people staring at a real danger together and deciding not to look away. You understand, Adrian said slowly, that if Marcus finds out how much you know before we're ready, he will try to go through you to get to me. I know that. You've been doing this for 2 months without protection. I've been doing this for 2 months without anyone noticing, she said. That's the same thing. He shook his head, not in dismissal, in something closer to disbelief. You walked into this marriage knowing none of this, he said. You built all of it from scratch, in 2 months, while living inside the house of the man you were investigating. I walked into this marriage knowing everything your father built and your accountants couldn't protect, she said quietly. I walked in knowing financial architecture, and I walked in knowing that the best place to hide is exactly where people think you're harmless. She paused. I didn't plan any of this specifically. I planned to survive. And surviving meant understanding the ground I was standing on. He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was different. Something formal had gone out of it. I owe you an apology, he said. She did not let herself react to that. She kept her face even. For what specifically, she asked. For the way you've been treated in this house, he said. By my men, by me. He met her eyes directly. You were brought here under circumstances you didn't choose. You were treated like furniture. And while all of that was happening, you were the only person in this entire organization who was actually protecting it. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. I wasn't protecting the organization, she said. I was protecting myself. The organization just happened to need the same thing. His mouth shifted slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. Either way, he said. Either way, she agreed. He stood. Tomorrow morning, he said, I want to go through everything. All of it. From the beginning. I want to understand every connection the way you understand it. That will take most of the day, she said. Then will take most of the day. He walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame and turned back once. The men who laughed at you at the reception, he said. The ones who have been treating you like you don't exist in this house. She waited. I'm going to handle that, he said. She shook her head slowly. Don't, she said. He looked surprised. If you change how they treat me now, they'll know something has shifted. Marcus will notice within 48 hours. Right now, my invisibility is the most valuable thing we have. She held his gaze. Let them keep laughing. Let them keep ignoring me. When this is over, there will be time. He studied her face. You're asking me to let my men disrespect my wife so that you can use their disrespect against the man who plans to kill me. Yes, she said simply. That's exactly what I'm asking. Another long pause. All right, he said. He left. Evelyn sat alone in her office for a long time after the door closed. She was not thinking about Adrian, or the plan, or Marcus, or the timeline. She was thinking about her father, about the man he had been before the debt, and the man the debt had made him. About the phone call she had received 2 weeks ago, careful and apologetic, asking obliquely whether she was all right, whether she was being treated well, in the tone of a man who could not quite bring himself to ask whether his daughter had forgiven him. She had told him she was fine. She was not sure that was the truth anymore, but she also wasn't sure it was a lie. She was something more complicated than fine. She was alive and sharp and working at the edge of her abilities inside a situation that would destroy most people, and there was something in that, underneath all the fear and calculation and exhaustion, something that felt almost like purpose. She closed the files on her desk. She went to bed. She lay in the dark and listened to the sounds of the estate, the distant noise of the city beyond the grounds, the closer sounds of the house settling, and she thought about Thursday. Marcus had chosen Thursday for a reason. She needed to know the reason before Thursday arrived. She was asleep by 1 in the morning. At 3:15, her phone buzzed once on the nightstand. A text from a number she did not recognize, 4 words. She read them twice. Her blood went cold. She got out of bed. She went to Adrian's study and knocked once sharply. He opened the door in 30 seconds, which meant he had not been sleeping either. She showed him the phone. He read the 4 words. His face did not change, but his jaw tightened in a way she had learned to read as the outermost edge of what he allowed himself to show. The text said, "She knows too much. They know we spoke tonight," Evelyn said. "There's someone in this house." The words landed in the space between them with the full weight of what they meant. Not just a mole in the organization, a mole inside the estate. Someone who had access to the house, to their movements, to the conversations that happened within these walls. Adrian looked at the phone. Then he looked at her. "How many people knew you were meeting with me tonight?" she said. "No one," he said. "I didn't tell anyone. Then someone saw you come to my office, she said, or heard it, or both. He was already moving to the door. Don't, she said sharply. He stopped. If you react right now, you hand Marcus everything, she said. He doesn't know what we know. He knows we spoke. That could mean 100 things to him. If you start tearing the house apart looking for a source tonight, he will know exactly what it means. Adrian turned back to face her. His control was extraordinary. She could see what it was costing him, the effort of standing still when every instinct told him to move, to confront, to eliminate the threat, but he was holding it. What do? We do nothing, she said. Tonight, we go back to our rooms. We behave normally tomorrow. And tomorrow, while we are going through the documents together, I will tell you how to find the person who sent that text without them knowing we are looking. He was quiet for a moment. You already have an idea, he said. I have a method, she said. It's something my father taught me. When you want to find a leak, you feed different information to different people and wait to see which version comes back to you. Controlled misinformation, he said. Yes, he nodded once. He looked at her for a moment with something in his eyes that she recognized from very few people in her life, a kind of specific respect that is different from admiration, more earned, more serious, the kind of respect that comes from watching someone operate under pressure and seeing that they do not bend. Go back to sleep, he said. You too, she said. They both knew neither of them would. She went back to her room and sat at her desk in the dark and thought about the mole and the timeline and Thursday and the 4 words on her phone and the fact that somewhere in this house, in the rooms around her, someone was watching everything. She thought about her father's lesson. She thought about the wedding and Marcus laughing and the men who looked through her and the dress that was designed to minimize her and the word fine spoken in the voice of a woman who could not think of anything better to say. She thought about the folder, the 60 hours of security footage, the 11 days tracking money through shell companies, the months of work that no one had believed a woman like her was capable of. She thought about Adrian's face when he read the documents. She thought about 4 words on a phone at 3 a.m, and she felt something settle in her chest. Not calm exactly. Not courage in any dramatic sense. Something more like clarity. The particular clarity of a person who has accepted the full reality of where they are and decided, fully and without reservation, that they are not going to lose. Evelyn Carter had never expected to be here, but she was here, and she was not going anywhere. Somewhere in the estate, a mole was sending texts into the dark, believing they were destroying her. They were not. They were making a mistake that Evelyn was already planning to use against them. By morning, she knew exactly how. She had the method worked out before sunrise. It was Tuesday morning, 5:47, and Evelyn was sitting at her desk with 3 sheets of paper in front of her, each one containing a slightly different version of the same piece of false information. The information itself was simple. She had constructed a fictional meeting, a conversation that had supposedly taken place between Adrian and a federal contact, a meeting that had never happened and never would, but that would sound credible to anyone inside the organization who was already nervous about exposure. The 3 versions differed in one specific detail each. In the first version, the fictional meeting had taken place on Monday evening. In the second, it had taken place Sunday afternoon. In the third, it had never been a meeting at all but a phone call on Saturday morning. She was going to share each version with a different person today. Then she was going to wait and see which version Marcus received. That version would tell her exactly who the mole was. She had 3 candidates, not because she suspected all 3 equally, but because the text had arrived at 3:15 in the morning, which narrowed the pool considerably. Most of the household staff lived off the estate. The people who stayed overnight were limited. A security man named Trent who rotated through overnight shifts, a housekeeper named Sandra who lived in the East Wing and had been with the family for 3 years, and a man named Carlo who served as Adrian's personal aide and whose room was directly adjacent to the study. Carlo had been with Adrian for 6 years. That was the fact that made her stomach tighten when she wrote his name on the 3rd sheet of paper. 6 years, the same approximate time frame in which Marcus had begun building his plan. She folded all 3 sheets and put them in the inside pocket of her cardigan. At 7:15, she went downstairs. Rosa was already in the kitchen. "Good morning," Evelyn said. Rosa looked at her face and said nothing for a moment. Then she poured a second cup of coffee and set it on the counter without being asked. "You look like you didn't sleep," Rosa said. "I slept a little," Evelyn said. "A little is not enough for whatever you're carrying." Rosa sat down across from her. "You don't have to tell me anything, but I've been in this house a long time, and I know when something is moving underneath the surface. Evelyn looked at her. Rosa had been here 11 years. She had survived 2 regime changes inside the Valenti organization, a federal investigation, and the death of Dominic Valenti, which had thrown the entire household into violent uncertainty for months. She was still here, still pouring coffee, still watching everything with those quiet, comprehensive eyes. "How much do you see?" Evelyn asked. "Everything," Rosa said simply. "But I don't repeat what I see. That's why I'm still here." Evelyn thought about it for 3 seconds. "Carlos," she said. "What do you know about him?" Rosa's expression did not change, but her hands wrapped around her coffee cup went very slightly still. "Why do you ask about Carlo?" "Because I'm asking about everyone," Evelyn said carefully. "And I'm asking you because I trust you more than I trust anyone else in this house. And I need you to be honest with me." Rosa was quiet for a moment. "Carlo has a brother," she said finally. "Younger brother. 20 years old. He got into trouble 2 years ago. The kind of trouble that costs money to make disappear." "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that someone powerful could help with," Rosa said, "or could use against you." Evelyn set down her coffee cup. That was it. That was the lever. Marxist had found Carlo's pressure point and pressed it 2 years ago, which aligned perfectly with the timeline of the financial diversions. "Thank you," Evelyn said. "Don't thank me," Rosa said. "Just be careful." Evelyn was already standing. She found Trent at 8 o'clock during his morning walkthrough of the East Wing and told him casually that she had overheard Adrian mention a meeting with a federal contact that had taken place Monday evening, and that she was worried about what it meant for the household's security going forward. She kept her voice slightly uncertain, slightly anxious, the voice of a woman out of her depth who was reaching for reassurance. Trent nodded and told her not to worry. She found Sandra at 9:30 in the upstairs hallway and mentioned the same fictional meeting, this time placing it on Sunday afternoon. Same anxious tone, same reaching quality. She did not approach Carlo directly. Instead, she made sure Carlo overheard her. At 10:15, she walked past the open door of Adrian's study while Carlo was inside organizing files, and she stopped in the doorway and said, to no one in particular, almost to herself, "I hope that call Saturday morning didn't cause more problems than it solved," then walked on. She said it in the tone of a woman talking to herself. Absent, distracted, Carlo would have heard every word. Now she waited. She went to find Adrian at 10:30, as they had arranged, and they spent the next 4 hours going through the complete documentation together. Adrian was methodical and focused in a way that impressed her. He did not rush. He did not dismiss details. He asked precise questions and he listened to her answers completely, not performing attention but actually paying it, tracking every connection she laid out with the specific concentration of a man who understood that his life depended on the accuracy of what he was hearing. At one point, about 2 hours in, he stopped and looked at her. "You cross-referenced the restaurant logs with the financial transfer dates," he said. "Yes. The transfers happen within 72 hours of each meeting. Always," she said. "He meets, he moves money. The meeting is the trigger, which means if we can identify the next meeting, we can predict the next transfer and intercept it before it completes," she said. He sat back. "You're not just documenting what happened," he said. "You're building a mechanism to stop what's coming." "I've been building it since the 3rd week," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "The Thursday meeting," he said. "I think Thursday is the transfer meeting," she said. "I think whatever money Marcus needs to finalize his arrangement with Calabrese, he moves it Thursday, which means Thursday is not just a trap for you. It's the completion of the financial architecture. If we stop the transfer, Marcus's deal with Calabrese collapses," she said. "He has nothing to offer them without the money. And without Calabrese's backing, he has no muscle to execute the transition." Adrian looked at her with an expression she was starting to recognize. It was the expression of a man who was used to being the smartest person in the room and had just found someone who made him genuinely have to think. "You've already set this up," he said. "You already have a way to intercept it." "I have the account numbers and the routing architecture," she said. "I need one thing from you." "What?" "A banker," she said. "Someone you trust completely, who is not connected to Marcus in any way, who has the authority to freeze those accounts before the transfer completes on Thursday." He thought for exactly 4 seconds. "I have someone," he said. "I need them today," she said. "Not tomorrow, today." He picked up his phone. It was at that moment, at 1:47 in the afternoon, that her own phone buzzed in her pocket. She looked at it under the table. A text from the same unknown number as the night before. 2 words this time. She read them twice. "Stop now." She did not show Adrian. Not yet. She needed to know first whether her leak test had worked, and she needed to know before she told him anything that would make him want to act before she was ready. She put the phone back in her pocket. They finished the session at 3 in the afternoon. Adrian made the call to his banker. She gave him the account numbers and watched him relay them in language that was carefully technical and completely unambiguous. When he hung up, he looked at her and said, "Done. He'll have access by tomorrow morning." "Good," she said. She went back to her office. At 4:30, the answer to her leak test arrived. Not in a text, in person. Carlo appeared at the door of her office, which he had never done before in the months she had been in the estate. He knocked twice. He was holding a tray with a cup of tea that nobody had asked for, and his face was carrying the particular expression of a man who is performing casualness so badly that the performance itself becomes the tell. "Mrs. Valenti," he said. "I thought you might want some tea." "Thank you, Carlo," she said. "Come in." He set the tray down. He did not leave immediately, which was wrong. Staff set things down and left. They did not linger. "Is there something else?" she said. He was looking at the papers on her desk, not obviously. "But looking, I heard you mention something this morning," he said. "About a phone call on Saturday." Evelyn kept her face completely neutral. "Did you?" she said. "I just wanted to make sure everything was all right," he said. Mr. Valenti seemed preoccupied today. "Mr. Valenti is fine," she said. "Thank you for the tea." He left. She waited 60 seconds. Then she went to find Adrian. He was in the east corridor, and when she touched his arm and said quietly, "Walk with me," he fell into step beside her without question. She led him to the garden entrance, where she was certain they would not be overheard. "It's Carlo," she said. Adrian stopped walking. The silence lasted about 4 seconds. "You're certain," he said. "He came to my office with tea he knew I didn't want," she said. "He was fishing. He wanted to see what I know. And the version of the story that came back through him matches exactly what I fed him this morning." Adrian turned away from her slightly. She could see what was moving through him. 6 years. Carlo had been with him for 6 years, and that was a long time, long enough to build trust, long enough for the betrayal to cut deep. "Don't do anything today," she said. He turned back. "If you move on Carlo now, Marcus knows we burned his source," she said. "We lose the warning system. Right now, Carlo thinks we don't know. That means everything he reports back to Marcus tonight is information we control. We can use him to feed Marcus exactly what we want Marcus to believe." Adrian's jaw was very tight. "You want me to leave a mole in my house for 2 more days? I want you to turn a mole into a weapon," she said. "For 2 more days. Then on Thursday, when it's over, you handle it however you need to handle it." He looked at her for a long moment. She could see him fighting it. The instinct to act. The need to do something physical and immediate about the betrayal sitting inside his own walls. 6 away to that. 2 days, he said. 2 days, she said. He nodded once and walked back inside. Evelyn stood alone at the garden entrance for a moment. Then she went back to her office and wrote a very specific note. The note was not true. Every word of it was constructed carefully to tell Marcus Bellina exactly what Evelyn needed him to believe for the next 48 hours. It described Adrian as panicked, distracted, uncertain about Thursday, considering postponing the meeting. It described Evelyn herself as confused and frightened, out of her depth, pressing Adrian to leave the city for the weekend. She left the note on her desk in a position where it would be visible to anyone who came into the room to look. She went to dinner. She ate well. She spoke to Adrian across the table about things that had nothing to do with Marcus or Thursday or any of it. The food, a book she had been reading, whether the East Wing needed repainting, normal conversation. The conversation household that was not sitting on a bomb with 2 days left on the clock. Carlo served the meal. Evelyn thanked him politely for the tea earlier. He smiled. She smiled back. That night she did not go to bed. She sat in her office with the lights low and worked through every contingency she could identify, every way Thursday could go wrong, every variable she had not yet locked down. The one that worried her most was Gerald Fitch. Fitch was the money man. He was the one who actually moved the funds through the shell architecture. If Fitch sensed something was wrong before Thursday, he could freeze the transfers from his end, and then the financial piece of the operation collapsed without giving them the evidence trail they needed to make it permanent. They needed the transfer to initiate. They needed it to move far enough into the system that it became refutable proof of the conspiracy before Evelyn's banker friend shut it down. Fitch had to believe everything was normal, which meant Marcus had to believe everything was normal, which meant Carlo had to believe everything was normal. She had set that up. But there was another variable she had not fully accounted for: the Calabrese family. If Calabrese had their own information source inside the Valenti organization, one that was not Carlo, one that she had not identified, then the entire controlled environment she had built could crack from a direction she was not watching. She made a list of every person who had contact with the Venezia restaurant's catering operation in the past 3 months. 14 names. She cross-referenced them against every name she had encountered in her financial research. At 2 in the morning, one name appeared in both lists. A delivery driver named Vincent Greco, who had made 6 deliveries to the restaurant in the past 90 days, which was not unusual, except that Vincent Greco had a brother-in-law named Paolo Ricci, who appeared once in the 1,983 federal surveillance records for the Calabrese organization as a known associate. It was thin. She knew it was thin. But thin was still a thread, and threads could unravel things. She pulled on it. She spent the next hour tracing Paolo Ricci through the same newspaper and public record archives she had used to identify Gerald Fitch, and at 3 in the morning, she found something that stopped her cold. Paolo Ricci had been employed by Meridian Group Partners, Gerald Fitch's shell company, the same shell company Marcus was using to move Adrian's money. It was not thin anymore. It was a direct connection between the Calabrese family, Marcus's financial architecture, and a person with active access to the Valenti operation's physical supply chain. Evelyn sat very still. This was not just a financial coup. Marcus had built redundancies. If the money move failed, if Adrian survived Thursday, there were other mechanisms in place. Physical mechanisms, people with access. Vincent Greco's delivery routes included the estate. The words landed in her chest like something cold and heavy. She picked up her phone and called Adrian. He answered on the second ring. He had not been sleeping either. "I need you to come to my office," she said. He was there in 4 minutes. She showed him the Paolo Ricci connection. She showed him the Meridian Group link. She showed him Vincent Greco's delivery schedule and the fact that his next scheduled delivery to the estate was Wednesday afternoon. Tomorrow afternoon, Adrian looked at the papers. "He's not coming here to deliver anything," he said. "No," she said. "He's not. He's coming to see the layout," Adrian said. "Or to leave something." "Or both," she said. He was already reaching for his phone. "Who are you calling?" she said quickly. "I need to put people on the gate." "You can't change your security posture," she said. "Not visibly. If you tighten the gate suddenly, Marcus knows the timeline is compromised. So I let a Calabrese man walk onto my property tomorrow." "You let him walk on," she said. "But I know exactly where he's going to go, and I need you to make sure there's someone already there who can follow every move he makes without being seen." Adrian put the phone down. He looked at her. "This is what you do," he said. Not a question. Not exactly an observation. Something more like a man recognizing a truth that had been in front of him for months. "This is what I do," she said. "You turn everything into an information operation." "Everything is an information operation," she said. "People with guns make noise. Information moves silently. You can't defend against it until it's already done." He was quiet. "My father used to say that the man with the best intelligence always wins," he said. "Your father was right," she said. Another pause. "He would have liked you," Adrian said. The words came out quietly, without performance, and they landed differently than she expected. Not as a compliment exactly. More like something genuine being offered across a space that had been empty for too long. She did not know what to do with that, so she moved on. "Tomorrow I need you to be completely ordinary," she said. "I need you to have a normal day. I need you to meet with Marcus in the morning and be relaxed, and act like Thursday is just another meeting." "I can do that," he said. "I know you can," she said. "But I need you to do it knowing that Carlo is in the room and watching, and that everything you show Marcus tomorrow determines what Marcus tells Fitch and Calabrese tonight." "And what do I show him?" "A man who is tired," she said. "A man who has been dealing with a lot of pressure from multiple directions and is looking forward to getting Thursday over with so he can take the weekend off. A man who is thinking about the weekend, not the meeting." Adrian thought about it. "A man who doesn't know," she said. "Exactly," she said. "A man who has no idea what's coming." He nodded. "And you," he said. "What are you doing tomorrow while I'm performing for Marcus?" "I'm finishing the case," she said. "I have one more connection to establish. Once I have it, the documentation is complete and irrefutable. It won't just end Marcus's plan. It will make it impossible for him to deny any part of it." "What's the connection?" "Gerald Fitch's personal financial records," she said. "I have the shell company architecture. I need his personal accounts to show where his payment from Marcus actually landed. Without that, Fitch walks away clean." "And how are you going to get his personal records?" She looked at him steadily. "I'm going to ask your banker friend to pull them," she said. "Under the same legal framework your organization uses for due diligence on business partners." Fitch appeared in Valenti financial documents as a consulting vendor. That gives you legal standing to request a financial background review. "That's technically true," Adrian said slowly. "It's completely true," she said. I built the request on the exact language your legal team uses for vendor verification. It will hold up under any scrutiny. He was quiet for a moment. You thought of this before tonight, he said. I thought of it 6 weeks ago, she said. I was waiting until I needed it. He shook his head very slowly. It was the gesture of a man who was running out of words for what he was looking at. Go back to bed, she said. You need to sleep. Tomorrow you need to be convincing, and you can't be convincing on no sleep. Can you? He said. I don't need to be convincing tomorrow, she said. I just need to be invisible. That part I've had practice with. He stood up to leave. At the door he stopped. After Thursday, he said. She waited. When this is over, he said, I want to talk about what happens next. Not just for the organization. For us, she held his gaze. After Thursday, she said. He left. She turned back to her desk. She had lied to him about one thing. She was not going to get Fitch's records through the banker. That would take too long and create a paper trail that Marcus might detect before Thursday. She was going to get them a different way. A way that required her to make a phone call she had been putting off for 2 weeks. She picked up her phone and dialed a number from memory. It rang 4 times. A man answered. I didn't think you'd actually call, he said. I told you I would when I needed you, she said. I need you now. The man on the other end of the phone was named Arthur Prentice, and he was 61 years old and had spent 30 years as a forensic accountant for the federal government before retiring 18 months ago to a small office in Midtown Manhattan where he did private consulting work for people who needed to understand money in ways that fell outside the standard options. He was also Thomas Carter's oldest friend. He was also, though he had never directly admitted it to anyone, the person who had tried for 2 years to quietly warn Thomas Carter that his investment decisions were going to destroy him. Thomas had not listened. Arthur had not stopped caring about Thomas's daughter. What do you need? Arthur said. She told him. He was quiet for a moment. Evelyn, he said. What you're describing if it goes wrong? It won't go wrong, she said. I need Fitch's personal accounts. I need everything that moved through them in the past 30 months. I need it by tomorrow evening. That's not a lot of time. I know, she said. Another pause. I'll call you by 6 tomorrow evening, he said. Thank you, Arthur. Don't thank me yet, he said. And Evelyn, be careful. Please, she hung up. She sat for a moment in the quiet. Wednesday was going to be the most dangerous day of all of this. Not Thursday, Wednesday. Because Wednesday was when all the pieces had to move simultaneously without any of them knowing the others were moving. Marcus had to be kept calm. Carlo had to be kept in the dark. Vincent Greco had to be followed without knowing he was being followed. Arthur had to pull Fitch's records without triggering any alert in the shell company architecture. And Adrian had to spend the day performing complete normalcy in front of the man who planned to have him killed in less than 48 hours. It was an extraordinary number of things that could go wrong. She made herself think through each one. She was still thinking at 5 in the morning when she heard the household begin to wake around her. The first sounds of the kitchen, Rosa moving downstairs, a door opening somewhere in the west wing. Wednesday had arrived. She stood up. She straightened her clothes. She went downstairs. Rosa looked at her from across the kitchen and said nothing, just poured the coffee. Evelyn wrapped both hands around the cup. She was ready. She thought she was ready. She did not know yet that Wednesday was going to deliver something she had not planned for. Something that would change everything she thought she understood about who was truly on her side. At 9:47 Wednesday morning, her phone rang. She looked at the screen. It was her father. She almost did not answer. Then she did. Evelyn. His voice was different from the careful, apologetic tone of recent weeks. Tighter. Faster. I need to tell you something. I should have told you sooner. I'm sorry. I should have told you months ago. Tell me now, she said. Marcus Bellini came to see me, Thomas Carter said, 3 weeks before your wedding. He told me that if I tried to warn Adrian about the debt situation before the marriage was finalized, he would destroy what was left of my career and go after your brother's business. Evelyn went very still. He threatened you into silence, she said. Yes, Thomas said, but that's not why I'm calling. I'm calling because he came back. Last week, he told me that if you did not leave the estate voluntarily within the next 10 days, he was going to make sure Adrian found evidence that you were the one who had been stealing from the organization. The silence stretched. He's building a frame, Evelyn said quietly. He has documents, Thomas said. I don't know how real they are, but he showed them to me. Evelyn, they looked real. Your name, your signature. It's a forgery, she said. I know. I've known for 2 weeks that he was building a contingency, she said. I just didn't know the specific mechanism. Now I do. She paused. Dad, did he tell you anything else? Anything about timing or what he planned to do with the documents? A pause. He said Thursday, Thomas said. He said by Thursday everything would be resolved one way or another. Thursday, the word landed like a stone. Thank you, she said. Evelyn, I'm sorry, he said. For the debt, for the marriage, for not telling you sooner, for being the reason you're inside that. Dad, she said. After Thursday, we'll talk, I promise. She hung up. She sat for exactly 30 seconds doing nothing. Then she opened her notebook and wrote down everything her father had just told her. The forged documents, Marcus's visit, the timeline confirmation. She looked at what she had written. Marcus had not just planned a coup. He had built an escape route. If the Thursday meeting succeeded, Adrian was gone and Marcus took over. If it failed, if somehow Adrian survived and started asking questions, Marcus had a ready-made story. The fake financial evidence against Evelyn would redirect Adrian's suspicion toward his own wife. And in the resulting chaos, Marcus could disappear. He had planned for failure. That was how smart he was. But he had made one mistake. He had gone to Thomas Carter. And Thomas Carter had called his daughter. Evelyn picked up her pen. She began writing the final piece of the case. Not just what Marcus had done. What Marcus had planned to do if everything went wrong. The forged documents. The threat against her father. The contingency architecture. By the time she was done, she had not just a case against Marcus Bellini. She had a cage, one he had built himself, one he could not get out of from any direction. She looked at the clock. It was 11:15 Wednesday morning. She had 33 hours until Thursday. And for the first time since this entire thing began, she was not afraid. 33 hours. That was what she had written in her notebook at 11:15 Wednesday morning. And now she understood exactly what those 33 hours had to carry. Not just the transfer interception. Not just the Thursday meeting. Not just Carlo and Vincent Greco and Gerald Fitch and the Calabrese connection. All of that was still in motion, still requiring management, still capable of unraveling if any single piece moved wrong. But now there was something else. The forged documents with her name on them. Marcus had built a frame around her, a contingency. If Thursday failed, if Adrian somehow survived and began asking questions, Marcus's answer was already prepared. Evelyn Carter, the outside woman, the debt bride, the one nobody trusted from the beginning, had been stealing from the organization all along. Here are the documents. Here is the evidence. Here's her signature. It was elegant in the same way his entire plan was elegant. Patient, built to survive multiple failure points. But he had made the mistake of showing those documents to Thomas Carter. And now Evelyn knew they existed. She spent the next 2 hours writing. Not analysis this time. A formal declaration, structured like a legal affidavit, describing every step of Marcus's plan from the first financial diversion through the Calabrese meetings, through the forged documents her father had been shown. She wrote it in language that was precise and verifiable and completely impossible to dismiss as the paranoid accusations of a frightened woman. She cross-referenced every claim with the corresponding documentation. She cited dates, account numbers, names, amounts. When she was done, she had 14 pages. She made 3 copies. At 1:30 Wednesday afternoon, she walked out of the estate with the copies in her bag and told the driver she needed to go into the city for personal errands. No one questioned her. She had established the habit of these midday trips weeks ago, specifically so that today's trip would look like nothing unusual. She mailed 1 copy to Arthur Prentice's office with a cover letter explaining what it was and what to do with it if she did not contact him by Friday morning. She mailed the 2nd copy to a safe deposit box she had opened in her own name at a bank branch in Midtown 6 weeks ago. The 3rd copy she kept. She was back at the estate by 3:15. At 4:47, her phone rang. Arthur. I have the Fitch records, he said. She closed her office door. Tell me. Gerald Fitch received 11 payments from Meridian Group Partners over 26 months, Arthur said. Total amount just under $800,000. The payments are categorized as consulting fees in the shell company records, but in Fitch's personal accounts, they're received under a different description entirely. A pause. They're categorized as investment returns from a private equity vehicle, which doesn't exist, she said. Which absolutely does not exist, Arthur confirmed. It's money laundering at the personal level. He's cleaning the payments through a fictional investment so that they look like legitimate capital gains rather than income from a criminal organization. Can you document it? I already have, he said. I'm sending you 43 pages by secure courier. You'll have it by 6, Arthur. This is everything, she said. This closes the entire case. Evelyn, his voice dropped. This is federal crime territory. What you've built here, this documentation, if this goes to the wrong person before you're ready, it doesn't just end badly for Marcus Bellini. I know, she said. You need to be safe tomorrow, he said. I will be. she said. She was not entirely sure that was true. The courier arrived at 5:58, 43 pages, exactly as Arthur had promised. She spent 40 minutes reading through them and cross-referencing against her existing documentation, and when she was done, the picture was so complete and so airtight that she sat back in her chair and felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in months. Relief, not victory, not yet. But the specific relief of knowing that the work was done, that what she had built was real and solid and capable of holding the weight she needed it to hold. She put the Arthur documents with everything else. Then she went to find Adrian. He was in the study, and when she came in and set the complete documentation package on his desk, all of it, every page of everything she had built over the past 2 months, plus Arthur's records, plus her 14-page affidavit, he looked at the size of the stack and then looked at her. "Is this what I think it is?" he said. "It's everything," she said. Marcus Fitch, Calabresi, Carlo, Vincent Greco, the forged documents with my name on them, the financial architecture from beginning to end. All of it documented, sourced, and independently verifiable. He opened the stack and began reading. She let him read. It took him 40 minutes to get through all of it. He read the way he did everything, completely, not skimming, not jumping ahead. When he reached the section about the forged documents and her father's call, he stopped and looked up. "He was going to use this against you," he said. "Yes," she said. If Thursday went wrong for him, he was going to hand Adrian Valenti evidence that his wife had been the thief all along. You would have been grieving and angry and looking for someone to hold responsible. And there it would be, ready-made. He would have destroyed you to cover his own exit. "He considered me disposable from the beginning," she said. "That was always the plan." Adrian looked at the forged documents section for a long moment. When he looked up again, something had changed in his face. It was not the cold, controlled anger she had seen from him before. It was something deeper than that, something personal. "No one touches you," he said. His voice was very quiet. "Not Marcus. That ends tonight." "It ends Thursday," she said firmly. "Not tonight. Not before we're ready." He held her gaze. "Thursday," he agreed. She sat down across from him. "Here is how Thursday works," she said. She walked him through every piece of it. He listened without interrupting, and when she was done, he asked 3 questions. Each question was precise and structural, about timing, about the banker's access window, about what happened if the transfer initiated faster than they anticipated. She had answers for all 3. When she was finished, he was quiet for a moment. "You've thought of everything," he said. "I've thought of everything I can think of," she said. "There are always variables. What's the one you're most worried about?" She considered the question honestly. "Marcus reads the room before he commits," she said. "He didn't get where he is by being reckless. If something feels wrong to him when he walks into that meeting Thursday morning, he pulls back. He doesn't move. And if he pulls back, we lose the transfer window and we lose the Calabrese evidence connection, and everything becomes much harder. So Thursday morning has to feel completely normal to him." "Completely," she said. "That means you walk in relaxed. You let him run the meeting. You don't push on anything. You let him believe he's in control of that room. And while he believes that, the transfer initiates, my banker contact intercepts it. Arthur Prentice has already sent copies of the Fitch documentation to 2 separate locations, and Carlo has fed Marcus information overnight that tells him you suspect nothing, and that I spent yesterday evening asking you to cancel Thursday and take me to Connecticut for the weekend." Adrian actually smiled at that last part. It was the first full smile she had seen from him. Not a cold curve of the mouth, not the near smile of someone who was impressed and did not want to show it. An actual, real human smile. "Connecticut," he said. "I needed something that would sound like me," she said. Frightened wife asking her powerful husband to take her somewhere safe. Very believable given my established reputation in this household. "Established reputation," he repeated. "You mean the reputation you deliberately built?" "Of course," she said. He shook his head slowly. Then he looked at her with that expression again, the one she had started recognizing as something specific to her, a look he did not give anyone else, a look that had been building since the first night she put the folder on the table. "After tomorrow," he said, "when this is over, I need to say some things to you." "You said that last night," she said. "I mean it more today than I did last night," he said. She held his gaze for a moment. "Let's get to tomorrow first," she said. She left him with the documents and went back to her office. At 9:30 Wednesday evening, she did something she had not planned. She called her mother. Not to tell her anything, not to explain any of it. Her mother was a gentle, quiet woman who had spent 30 years not quite understanding the world her husband moved through. And Evelyn was not going to change that tonight. She called because she needed to hear a voice that was completely outside all of it. Evelyn, her mother said, "How are you, sweetheart?" "I'm good, Mom," she said. "You sound tired." "I'm a little tired. Are they treating you well?" She thought about how to answer that. "Better than they were," she said. "Getting better." "I worry about you," her mother said. "I want you to know I think about you every day." "I know, Mom. Your father has been very quiet lately, very unlike himself." "He'll be okay," Evelyn said. "Tell him I called." A pause. "Evelyn, you know I never wanted this for you. If you ever need to just come home, I'm okay," she said. "I promise I'll call you this weekend. We'll talk properly." She hung up. She sat for a moment with the phone in her hand. This weekend. If Thursday went right, there would be a this weekend. A different kind of this weekend than any she had experienced since the wedding. Different ground, different air. If Thursday went wrong, the 14-page affidavit she had mailed to Arthur would go to 3 federal offices by Friday morning, and the rest of it would be out of her hands entirely. She preferred the first option. She went to bed at 11 and slept 4 hours, which was more than she expected. At 3 in the morning Thursday, she was awake and dressed and sitting at her desk with coffee and the complete case file open in front of her. Not because she needed to review it, but because the physical act of having it in front of her was grounding. At 4:15, Adrian knocked at her door. She was not surprised. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "I got 4 hours," she said. "That's enough." He came in and sat down, and she poured him coffee from the pot on her desk without being asked, and they sat together in the quiet of the early morning with the documentation spread between them, not talking for a while, just present. It felt unexpectedly like something she recognized from her life before all of this. The particular quality of sitting with someone in a shared silence that was not empty, the kind of silence that belongs to two people who understand each other well enough not to need to fill every moment. "Tell me something," Adrian said finally. "Before all of this, before your father's situation, what were you doing? What was your life?" She looked at him. It was an unusual question from an unusual man at an unusual hour. "I was working for a financial consulting firm in Brooklyn," she said. "Small company, 3 partners. I was the person they sent in when a client's books didn't add up and they needed someone to find out why without making a scene about it. A forensic accountant," he said. "Unofficially," she said. "I never finished the certification. I kept meaning to, but the work was always there, and I was good at it without the credentials. So, how long were you doing that?" 4 years, she said. "Since I was 24. "Did you like it?" She thought about the question genuinely. "I like being the person who found the truth," she said. "I like knowing that whatever story someone had constructed around a set of numbers, I could find the real story underneath it. I liked that it was always there. The truth was always in the numbers somewhere, waiting." He was looking at her carefully. "And that's what you've been doing here," he said. "Yes," she said, "just on a larger scale, with higher consequences." "You weren't afraid when you started, knowing whose house you were inside?" "I was terrified," she said. "Every day. For the first 3 weeks, I was genuinely terrified in a way I have never been before in my life." She paused. "But the fear was useful. It kept me careful. It kept me from moving too fast or assuming too much." "What changed after 3 weeks?" "I found the first financial anomaly," she said. "The first real proof that something was wrong inside the organization. And once I found it, the fear changed into something different. Not less, just different. It became fuel instead of paralysis." He was quiet for a moment. "I spent 2 months looking at you and seeing nothing," he said. "I want you to understand that I know what that cost me. What it almost cost me. You saw what I needed you to see," she said. "That's generous." "It's accurate," she said. "Adrian, if you had noticed me from the beginning, Marcus would have noticed that you noticed, and then he would have noticed me. And none of this works if Marcus had been watching me." He considered that. "You used my blindness as cover," he said. "I used everyone's blindness as cover," she said. "Yours was just the most important one." Something moved across his face. Then at 5:03 Thursday morning, his phone buzzed on the desk between them. He looked at it. She watched his face. He turned the phone to show her. A text from a number she recognized as one of his outer ring security contacts. 3 words, "Marcus is moving." She was on her feet before she had consciously decided to stand. "Early," she said. "He's moving early. What does that mean?" Adrian's voice was controlled but fast. "It means he doesn't feel as comfortable as we thought," she said. Something shifted for him. Something we didn't account for. Her mind was already running through it. What could have changed? What piece of the controlled environment had cracked without her knowing? She had fed Carlo the Connecticut story last night. The banker had confirmed the account access was active. Arthur had his copies. Vincent Greco's Wednesday visit had been followed without incident. And then she knew. "My father," she said. Marcus went back to my father. When my father didn't call him to confirm that I was frightened and considering leaving, Marcus knew something was wrong. She grabbed her phone and called Arthur. He answered on the second ring. The copies, she said. Are they in place? Everything I have is already distributed, Arthur said. Evelyn, what's happening? Execute now, she said. Don't wait for my call Friday. Execute now. Are you certain? Now, Arthur, please. She hung up and looked at Adrian. The transfer, she said. Call the banker. Tell him to initiate the freeze immediately. Not when the transfer starts now. We freeze the accounts now while Fitch is still moving money into position. If we freeze before the transfer initiates, we lose the completion evidence, Adrian said. We already have the preparation evidence, she said. It's enough. Arthur's documentation plus what I have is enough to establish the conspiracy even without the completed transfer. She held his gaze. But if we wait for the transfer to initiate, and Marcus has already accelerated the Thursday timeline, we may not have the window we planned for. He picked up his phone. He called the banker. She listened to him give the instruction, clear and direct, freeze all accounts associated with the Meridian Group partners, network effective immediately, authorization Valenti, and then he hung up and looked at her. Done, he said. At 5:19 Thursday morning, Evelyn's phone rang. Unknown number, she answered Mrs. Valenti. The voice was Marcus's. Smooth and controlled, and carrying underneath it, very faintly, the first edge of something that was not quite as controlled as he wanted it to sound. I think we need to talk. She did not respond immediately. She let the silence sit for 2 full seconds. I agree, she said. Where the estate library, he said, in 30 minutes. Just the two of us. Just the two of us, she repeated. Adrian doesn't need to be involved in this conversation. Marcus said, what I have to say is for you, a private matter. She understood exactly what this was. Marcus wanted to deliver the ultimatum in person. The forged documents, the threat. He wanted to look at her face when he did it. He wanted to see her break. He had no idea what was waiting for him. 30 minutes, she said. I'll be there. She hung up and turned to Adrian. He wants to meet me in the library, she said, alone. Every muscle in Adrian's face went tight. Absolutely not, he said. Adrian, he said. No, whatever play you're constructing right now, I am not letting you walk into a room alone with that man. Not today. Not after everything. He is not going to hurt me in this house, she said. He's too smart for that. He wants to threaten me into leaving. That's all this is. That's all you think this is. Listen to me. She put her hand flat on the desk between them. If you come into that room, he shuts down immediately and we lose the conversation. I need him talking. I need him to say what he plans to say clearly in a room where I can document it. She held Adrian's gaze. I am walking in there with my phone recording. Whatever he says becomes part of the case. But he will only say it if he believes he has the upper hand. And he will only believe he has the upper hand if it is just me in that room. And if he decides to do something other than talk, then you will be 20 feet away on the other side of that door, she said. And the moment I open it, you come in. He looked at her for a long, hard moment. 20 feet, he said. Not further, she agreed. She picked up her phone, opened the voice recording application, pressed record, and slid the phone into the inside pocket of her cardigan. She walked to the library. Marcus was already there when she arrived, which meant he had been in the house, moving through it for longer than 30 minutes. He had positioned himself with his back to the far wall, which was the instinct of a man who wanted to see every entrance. He was dressed in a suit that was too deliberate for 5:30 in the morning. He looked at her when she came in. He smiled. It was the same smile from the hallway 6 months ago. The smile of a man who believed he was in the presence of something that did not matter. Sit down, Evelyn, he said. She sat. She folded her hands in her lap, very still, and she looked at him with the expression she had practiced for exactly this moment. Not fear, not defiance, just openness, the face of a woman who was listening. You're a smart woman, he began. I underestimated that at the start, and I want to acknowledge it. You've been paying attention, I noticed that. Thank you, she said quietly. But paying attention and understanding what you're looking at are two different things, he said. I think you've been looking at things you don't fully understand, and I think that's put you in a position that is dangerous for you. Tell me what you mean, she said. He reached into his jacket and produced a folder. He set it on the table between them and opened it. The forged documents, her signature, rendered with impressive precision, financial transfer records that did not exist, attributed to accounts she had never held. This is what Adrian will see if you are still in this house by Sunday, Marcus said. This is what every person in this organization will see. This is the story of Evelyn Carter, the woman Thomas Carter sold to Adrian Valenti as part of an arrangement to cover a debt. who then used her access to this household to continue stealing from the organization her father had already robbed. She looked at the documents. She let herself look at them the way a frightened woman would look at them, with horror, with the dawning understanding of what they meant. Those aren't real, she said. Her voice was exactly right. Small, uncertain. They are real enough, Marcus said. Real enough to destroy you. Real enough to make Adrian question everything he thinks he knows. Real enough to make the rest of this organization wonder whether the debt bride was a plant all along. She was quiet for a moment. What do you want? She said. I want you to leave, he said. Today, pack what you need and go. Tell Adrian your marriage was a mistake and you are going back to your family. Do it calmly, do it cleanly, and these documents disappear forever. And if I don't, then by Sunday morning, every person who matters in this city will have seen them, he said. And you will have nothing. No marriage, no protection, no future. The silence in the room was very complete. Evelyn looked at the documents on the table. Then she looked up at Marcus Bellini. And for the first time since the hallway 6 months ago, she let her real face show. Not fear, not uncertainty, not the performance she had been giving him since the beginning. Just clarity. I want to show you something, she said. She reached into the other side of her cardigan and produced her own folder. She set it on the table next to his. She opened it. Marcus looked down. His face did not change immediately. It took 3 seconds. She counted them. On the first second, he was still smiling. On the second second, the smile began to break apart. On the third second, he looked up at her, and she saw in his eyes the precise moment that a man who has spent 2 years believing he is the smartest person in the room understands that he's been completely wrong. That is every financial transfer you made through Meridian Group Partners over the past 26 months, she said calmly. That is Gerald Fitch's personal account documentation showing exactly where the money went and how he cleaned it. That is the surveillance record of your meetings at the Venezia restaurant with a Calabrese lieutenant. That is the documentation of Carlo's role as your information source inside this estate. That is the record of Vincent Greco's Wednesday visit and his connection through Paolo Ricci to both your organization and the Calabrese family. She paused. And that is a 14-page affidavit that has already been distributed to 3 locations outside this estate, written in my hand, describing everything I just said and more. Marcus was very still. You cannot use those, he said. His voice had changed, still controlled, but different. They are already in use, she said. The accounts connected to your transfer architecture were frozen at 5:19 this morning. Gerald Fitch's personal accounts were flagged simultaneously. Arthur Prentice, who compiled the Fitch documentation, has already transmitted copies to 2 independent locations with instructions for distribution by Friday morning if he does not receive a specific call from me. Marcus looked at the documents. He looked at her. The forged documents, she said. I know you had someone skilled produce them. The signature is very good. I'll give you that. But skilled forgeries still fail when they are placed next to a complete financial fraud case that predates them by 2 years. She tilted her head slightly. No one is going to believe I was stealing from this organization when I am the person who documented what you were stealing. The silence stretched. Marcus's jaw moved. You are 28 years old, he said finally. It came out as almost nothing, almost a whisper. 29, she said. My birthday was last month. The door to the library opened. Adrian walked in. He had heard enough. She knew from the expression on his face that he had heard all of it, every word. Through the door 20 feet away, where he had stood for the entire conversation. He walked to the table. He looked at Marcus Bellini for a long moment. Marcus looked back. 2 men who had known each other for 12 years standing on opposite sides of something that could not be crossed back over. 12 years, Adrian said. His voice was very quiet. I want you to know that I am aware of what 12 years means. I'm not pretending otherwise. Marcus said nothing. But you went after my wife, Adrian said. You threatened her father. You put her name on documents designed to destroy her. And you did all of it while sitting at my table and calling yourself my most trusted man. Still nothing from Marcus. The accounts are frozen, Adrian said. The documentation is distributed. The Calabrese connection has already been relayed to people who will make sure that particular partnership is no longer viable. He paused. It's done, Marcus, all of it. Marcus looked at Evelyn one last time. She held his gaze. The woman you never considered dangerous, she said quietly. It was the last thing she said to him. What happened after that was Adrian's to manage, and she left the library and stood in the hallway outside and leaned against the wall and breathed. Her hands were not trembling this time. She pressed them flat against her legs anyway. Rosa appeared at the end of the hallway, carrying nothing not performing any task, just there, the way Rosa was always simply there when something important had happened. Evelyn looked back. "It's done," Evelyn said. Rosa exhaled slowly. "Come have coffee," she said. Evelyn pushed off the wall. She followed Rosa to the kitchen. She sat down at the table where she had sat on the first morning in this house, when the loneliness of the estate had felt like something physical pressing against her from all sides, when she had been furniture in a machine that did not know she existed. Rosa poured the coffee. Evelyn wrapped both hands around the cup. Outside, in the world that was slowly becoming morning, the city moved the way it always moved, with total indifference to the small, quiet, extraordinary thing that had just happened inside one room of one estate in Westchester. Evelyn Carter knew, and for now that was enough. The coffee was still hot when Adrian walked into the kitchen. He stopped in the doorway when he saw her sitting at the table with Rosa, both hands wrapped around her cup, looking like a woman who had just finished something enormous and was not quite sure yet what to do with the quiet that followed. He stood there for a moment, just looking at her, and something in his face was different from every other time he had stood in the doorway and looked at Evelyn Carter. Before, he had looked through her. Now he looked at her the way you look at something you almost lost before you understood its value. Rosa stood up without being asked, took her own coffee, and left the kitchen with the particular discretion of a woman who had spent 11 years knowing exactly when to disappear. Adrian sat down in the chair Rosa had left. Neither of them spoke immediately. The kitchen held the specific silence of early morning, the kind that belongs to people who have been awake all night and have arrived on the other side of something that cannot be undone. "It's over," he said finally. "The immediate part is over," she said. "The rest of it takes time." He looked at her. "The organization," she said. "What Marcus built inside it does not disappear because Marcus is gone. The people he cultivated, the loyalties he redirected, the small corruptions he allowed to grow because they made people dependent on him. That infrastructure is still there. It has to be dismantled carefully, or it rebuilds itself around someone new." He was quiet for a moment. "You've already been thinking about how to do that," he said. "For 6 weeks," she said. He exhaled slowly, not in frustration, in something closer to wonder. "You were planning the reconstruction before the crisis was even resolved," he said. "The reconstruction is the point," she said. "Stopping Marcus was necessary. But if we stop Marcus and leave the conditions that made Marcus possible, we have solved nothing. Someone else fills that space. Someone smarter, maybe. Someone more patient." Adrian put both hands flat on the table. "What do you need?" he said. It was the same question he had asked her weeks ago, the night he saw the folder, the night everything shifted between them. But it sounded different now. Less like a man agreeing to use a resource and more like a man making a genuine offer to a genuine partner. She recognized the difference. "Access," she said. "Real access. Not the bookkeeping files for one restaurant. The full financial architecture of the organization, every legitimate business, every revenue stream, every holding structure. I need to be able to see all of it." "Done," he said. "I need to be in the room when decisions are made," she said. "Not as a presence, as a participant. If I am going to help you protect this, I need to understand the decisions from the inside." "Done," he said again. "And I need the men in this organization to understand that when I speak, I am speaking with your authority," she said. "Not as your wife, as your partner. Those are different things and they need to understand the difference." He nodded slowly. "There's going to be resistance," he said. "Some of these men have been in this world for 20 years. They are not going to adjust easily to taking direction from a woman," she said. "From someone they don't yet respect," he said. "I was trying to find a more diplomatic version." "The diplomatic version is less accurate," she said. "They don't respect me because they don't know me. That changes the moment they understand what I did and how I did it." She paused. "I'm not asking them to like it immediately. I'm asking them to accept it long enough to see results." "Results are what these men respond to, they are," he agreed. "Then give me 90 days, she said. 90 days of full access and genuine authority, and I will show you results they cannot argue with." He looked at her for a long moment. "Evelyn," he said. And then he stopped, which was unusual for him. Adrian Valenti was not a man who ran out of words. He started again. "I need to say what I said I was going to say. After Thursday, this is after Thursday," she waited. "I brought you into this house as a transaction," he said. "A way to manage a problem. I told myself it was a clean arrangement, that you understood what it was and what it wasn't, and that made it acceptable." He paused. "That was a lie I told myself, because it was easier than the truth." "What was the truth?" she said. "That what I did to you was wrong," he said. "That regardless of your father's debt and the arrangement and all of the practical reasoning, You were a person who deserved more than to be used as a financial instrument. And I used you, and then I ignored you. And the entire time I was doing both of those things, you were working harder to protect me than any person I have ever employed. The kitchen was very quiet. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said. I'm not sure I've earned the right to ask for it yet. But I want you to know that I see what happened clearly, and I want to do better, considerably better. Evelyn looked at him for a long time. She thought about the wedding, the dress that was designed to minimize her, the whispers as she walked down the aisle, the word fine spoken with pity, Marcus's hand on her wrist, the bones grinding, the hallway full of men who looked away. She thought about 60 hours of security footage and 14 pages of affidavit and the 4 words on a phone at 3 in the morning. She thought about what it had cost her, not just professionally, not just in sleepless nights and sustained fear, but personally, the months of being invisible in a house where she lived, of eating meals beside a man who looked through her, of building something extraordinary in total silence. Because silence was the only safe way to build it. I know you see it, she said finally. I could tell when you changed. She paused. Doing better is enough. I'm not asking for anything dramatic. I'm asking for what you just offered. Access. Partnership. Being treated like someone who matters in this space. You are the most important person in this space, he said. I think you have been from the moment you arrived, and I was simply the last to understand it. She held his gaze. 90 days, she said. Let's see what we can build. Something settled between them. Not romantic in any performed or dramatic sense. Something more foundational than that. The specific settlement of 2 people who have looked at each other clearly, in the full light of difficult circumstances, and decided to choose each other anyway. Rosa came back into the kitchen 10 minutes later, took one look at the 2 of them, and put a fresh pot of coffee on without saying a word. It was the most eloquent response possible. The days that followed Thursday moved fast and then faster. The immediate fallout from Marcus's removal required Adrian's full attention for the first 72 hours, and Evelyn gave him the space to manage it while she worked on the second phase of what she had promised him. She spent Friday and Saturday mapping the complete internal structure of the organization's personnel, identifying every person who had been cultivated by Marcus over the past 2 years, every loyalty that had been quietly redirected, every small debt or vulnerability that Marcus had used to build his internal network. By Sunday morning, she had a list of 11 names. Not all of them were traitors in any serious sense. Some were simply men who had been maneuvered into positions where they owed Marcus something. Men who had accepted small favors without understanding the full weight of what accepting them meant. Those men were retrievable. They needed to be addressed directly and clearly, given the opportunity to reorient their loyalty without losing face, and then watched carefully for the next 6 months. 4 of the 11 were not retrievable. She gave Adrian both lists on Sunday afternoon with a brief, precise explanation of how she had reached her conclusions and what she recommended for each category. He read through it. He looked up. You separated them by risk level, he said, and by cost of action, she said. The 4 you need to remove entirely. The removal has to be handled carefully to avoid creating martyrs or causing the retrievable 7 to panic and consolidate against you. Sequence matters. What sequence do you recommend? Start with the one closest to Marcus's inner circle, she said. A man named Sal Ferraro. He was Marcus's primary operational contact for the Calabrese meetings. He has the most information and the most incentive to use it. He goes first quietly, before anyone else realizes the full scope of what you know. Adrian was already reaching for his phone. The others follow over 2 weeks, she said. Not all at once. Gradual enough to look like normal organizational adjustment rather than a purge. He stopped reaching for the phone. A purge creates fear, she said. Fear makes the retrievable men choose sides before you've had a chance to bring them back. Gradual removal looks like management. It gives people time to read the room, understand which way things are moving, and make the sensible choice. He put the phone down. You're right, he said. I usually am, she said. About the numbers and the people. The numbers are more reliable, but the people aren't far behind. He looked at her with that expression again. 90 days, he said. We're 3 days in, she said, 87 to go. Monday morning brought the first real test of what Adrian had promised her. He called a meeting of the organization's 6 remaining senior lieutenants, the men who formed the actual decision-making core of the Valenti operation, and he asked Evelyn to be present. She walked into that room knowing exactly what she was walking into. These were men who had attended her wedding and laughed. Men who had passed her in the hallways of the estate for months without speaking to her directly. Men who knew her primarily as the heavy-set woman Thomas Carter had offered to settle a debt, the woman Adrian had accepted out of convenience and then largely ignored. They looked at her when she walked in. She looked back. She sat down at the table without waiting to be invited. Adrian spoke first. He told them, in plain, unembellished language, what had happened with Marcus. He told them about the financial architecture, the Calabrese connection, the planned takeover. He did not soften it. He did not perform anger or grief. He stated facts in the order they had occurred and let the facts do the work. The men around the table were very still. Then Adrian said the sentence Evelyn had been waiting for. The person who uncovered this, documented it, and gave us the ability to move before Marcus completed his plan, he said, is sitting at this table. Every eye in the room moved to her. She did not look away from any of them. She let the silence hold for exactly 3 seconds. Then she opened the folder in front of her and began to speak. She walked them through the key elements of the case. Not everything, but enough. The financial diversions, the Calabrese meetings, the forged documents, the timeline. She spoke the way she always spoke when she was presenting financial evidence, clearly, specifically, without drama, letting the numbers and the documented facts carry the weight rather than her voice or her emotion. When she finished, the room was quiet. A lieutenant named Frank Donato, who was the oldest man in the room and the one whose opinion carried the most weight among the others, leaned back in his chair and looked at her with an expression she could not immediately read. How long, he said. From when I started to when I had a complete case, she said. 8 from inside this house. Yes, without resources. With limited resources, she said. I had access to the financial files for the legitimate businesses. I had the public record. I had time and the willingness to use it. Frank Donato looked at Adrian. You knew, he said. I knew when she showed me, Adrian said. She came to me when the case was complete and the protective measures were already in place. Frank looked back at Evelyn. Why didn't you come to Adrian first? He said. When you found the first anomaly, it was a fair question. She had expected it. Because I could not yet prove that the problem was isolated to Marcus, she said. In the early stages of the investigation, I had to consider the possibility that other people in this organization were involved. I needed the complete picture before I brought it to anyone, because bringing an incomplete picture to the wrong person would have ended everything. Frank Donato was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded once. It was a small gesture, contained. But in the context of that room, from that man, it was significant, and every other person at the table read it the same way she did. The meeting ended 40 minutes later. As the men filed out, 2 of them stopped near her, not to speak exactly. Just paused briefly in a way that acknowledged her presence as something real rather than something to be moved around. It was a beginning. Adrian caught her eye across the table. She gave him nothing visible, just the smallest tilt of her chin. He understood. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that was unlike anything she had expected when she arrived at this estate 8 months ago. She worked, and she was seen working. She sat in meetings and she spoke when she had something to say, and what she said was always grounded in evidence and analysis, never in emotion or authority borrowed from Adrian. She built her credibility the only way she knew how to build anything. Methodically, one demonstrated truth at a time. Arthur Prentice came to the estate in the 4th week and spent 2 days working alongside her on the complete financial restructuring of the organization's legitimate business holdings. She introduced him to Adrian as her consultant, and Adrian shook Arthur's hand and treated him with the courtesy reserved for people who had earned it. Arthur pulled her aside at the end of the first day. You look different, he said. I feel different, she said. Good different, she thought about it. Yes, she said. Good different. He looked around the office she had made her own, the bookshelves organized by subject, the financial records in labeled files, the coffee pot that Rosa kept filled without being asked. Your father wants to call you, he said. He's not sure you want to hear from him. Tell him to call, she said. Tell him I'm ready. Thomas Carter called that evening. He was careful and quiet in the way he had been since the debt, still carrying the particular weight of a man who had damaged something he loved and could not find the way back to it. I heard it went well, he said. Arthur told me. It went the way it needed to go, she said. Evelyn. His voice cracked slightly on her name. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. All right, she said. Are you safe? Truly safe? Not the way you tell your mother you're safe, not the managed version. Actually safe? She looked around her office, at the files, at the coffee pot, at the window through which she could see the estate grounds settling into the early evening. Yes, she said, I am actually safe. The silence on the line stretched. Are you happy? He said. His voice was barely above a whisper. It was a harder question. She thought about the answer honestly. I'm becoming something, she said. Something I didn't know I was going to become. Whether that's happiness, I'm not sure. But it's real. And it's mine. And I built it myself. That counts for something. He was quiet for a moment. It counts for a great deal, he said. In my experience, it counts for more than most things. Call me next week, she said. We'll talk properly. She hung up. She sat for a moment. Then she picked up the financial restructuring proposal she had been working on and went back to work. The twist that changed everything came in the 7th week. It did not come from inside the organization. It came from outside it, from a direction she had not fully accounted for, not because she had missed it, but because she had not yet had the standing to address it. A federal investigator named Charles Webb had been building a case against the Valenti organization for 3 years. He was methodical and patient and good at his job, and the Thursday morning transfer interception had triggered a flag in a financial monitoring system that connected directly to his office. He sent 2 agents to the estate on a Tuesday afternoon. Adrian was in the city. The agents were shown to the sitting room by Rosa, who then came to find Evelyn with an expression that was carefully controlled, but carried underneath it the particular tension of someone who understood the significance of what had just arrived. Evelyn went to the sitting room. She introduced herself. The agents introduced themselves and explained that they were following up on flagged activity related to accounts associated with Meridian Group Partners and Gerald Fitch. She looked at them. I've been expecting this conversation, she said. I was hoping it would happen under slightly more organized circumstances. But here we are. She paused. Would you like coffee? This is going to take a while. They looked at each other briefly. Sure, the senior agent said. She called Rosa. Then she sat down across from the 2 federal agents and she began to talk. She told them about Gerald Fitch, about Meridian Group Partners, about the 26 months of payments and the shell architecture and Arthur Prentice's forensic documentation. She told them exactly what she knew, what she could prove, and what she was prepared to hand over. She did not tell them everything about the Valenti organization. She was not going to dismantle Adrian's world. That was not what this was. But Gerald Fitch was not Adrian's world. Fitch was a criminal who had laundered money for Marcus Bellini's coup attempt, and his exposure served a legitimate purpose that had nothing to do with loyalty. The senior agent, whose name was Patterson, listened to everything she said without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Valenti, he said carefully, you understand the nature of the organization your husband runs. I understand the nature of everything in this house, she said. That is my specific professional value. Patterson looked at her. What you're handing us on Fitch, he said, this is real. Everything I give you is real, she said. I do not deal in approximations. Why are you giving it to us? Because Gerald Fitch used a criminal conspiracy to try to destroy my husband and frame me for the crimes of the man who orchestrated that conspiracy, she said. Gerald Fitch does not get to walk away from that because he was careful about his paperwork. The second agent, younger, who had not spoken yet, leaned forward slightly. You built this case while living inside the organization, he said. Not an accusation, something more like genuine astonishment. Yes, she said, in 8 weeks, 8.5, she said. He sat back. Patterson looked at the documentation she had placed on the table between them. We're going to need to verify all of this, he said. Of course, she said. Arthur Prentice, who compiled the personal account records, is available for interview. His methodology is clean, and his credentials are impeccable. Everything I have given you will hold. Patterson picked up the folder. He looked at it. Mrs. Valenti, he said. Are you represented by counsel? Not currently, she said. Should I be? He looked at her with the expression of a man who was recalibrating something in real time. It might not be a bad idea, he said. I'll consider it, she said. In the meantime, if you have questions about the documentation, I am available to answer them. They left an hour later with copies of everything she had given them on Fitch. She called Adrian as soon as their car left the estate grounds. He picked up on the first ring. Federal agents came to the house, she said. Silence. Then I'm fine, she said. They came about Fitch and the Meridian accounts. The transfer interception triggered a monitoring flag. What did you tell them? Everything about Fitch, she said. Nothing that wasn't already connected to the transfer investigation. I gave them Arthur's documentation and my own records on the shell architecture. Longer this time. You gave federal agents a case, he said. I gave federal agents a case against Gerald Fitch, she said, who is not your man, who tried to destroy us both, who deserves exactly what is coming to him. She could hear him thinking on the other end of the line. The lead agent. Patterson is Charles Webb's man. I know, she said. Webb has been building against you for 3 years. What I gave Patterson today is not a brick in that building. It is a separate structure entirely, and it is built on evidence that directs attention toward Fitch and away from everything else. If Patterson tries to use it as a bridge to Webb's investigation, the documentation itself will demonstrate that the connection doesn't exist. The silence on the line was the longest yet. Then Adrian said something she did not expect. I need you to come to the city, he said, tonight. There is a dinner, important people, and I want you there. Not as decoration, she understood that immediately. Not as the wife brought out to perform normalcy for a room full of men who needed to see that the Valenti household was stable. What time, she said. 7:30, he said. Wear something you like. Not something designed to make you smaller. She stood in her office for a moment after she hung up, holding the phone. Then she smiled. It was a real smile. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and surprised. The kind you do not perform for anyone. She went upstairs. She wore the dress she had never worn before, the one she had bought for herself 3 months ago from a shop in Midtown on one of her research trips to the city, the one she had hung in the back of the closet, because the occasion had never felt right. Dark blue, clean lines, built to fit her body rather than minimize it. She came downstairs at 7:15. Adrian was waiting in the hallway. He looked at her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. You look like yourself, he said finally. I always look like myself, she said. People just weren't paying attention. He offered his arm. She took it. They walked out together. The dinner was a room full of powerful people who had spent years constructing their own versions of what power looked like, and who wore those versions like armor. Evelyn had been in rooms like this before. On the other side of the financial consulting work she had done in Brooklyn, occasionally brought in to explain something technical to people who needed the explanation but did not want to feel like they were being lectured. She knew how to move in this room. She also knew something she had not known before, something that 8 months inside the Valenti estate had given her. She knew which of these people were performing their power and which ones actually had it, and she knew that the difference was almost always invisible to the performers themselves. Adrian introduced her to several people over the course of the evening. Each introduction was the same. This is my wife, Evelyn. She is the financial architect of our organization. Not my wife, Evelyn. Not Evelyn, my wife. The financial architect of our organization. The first time he said it, she almost missed a step. She did not miss a step. A woman named Diana Hargrove, who ran a legitimate real estate development company that intersected with several of Adrian's holdings, cornered her near the bar at 9:30. Diana was in her mid-50s, sharp-eyed, and had the manner of someone who had spent decades being underestimated by men who later regretted it. She looked at Evelyn for a long moment. How long have you been doing this? She said. Professionally? 4 years before this, Evelyn said. In this context, about 8 months. And before that they had no one? They had people, Evelyn said, just not the right kind. Diana smiled. It was a real smile, the kind that recognized something. Adrian Valenti has been the most impossible man to get a coherent conversation out of for 6 years, she said. Tonight he has talked about your analysis of the Q3 revenue structure 3 separate times. She paused. Whatever you're doing, it's working. I'm just doing the work, Evelyn said. That's always what it is, Diana said, just the work. And somehow that's the rarest thing in any room. She moved on. Evelyn stood for a moment with her drink. Just the work. She thought about her father saying that the truth was always in the numbers. She thought about Arthur saying that everything she had built would hold. She thought about Rosa pouring coffee at 5 in the morning without being asked. She thought about Danny Ruiz holding a door open with genuine courtesy when no one else in the building acknowledged she existed. She thought about 60 hours of security footage in a warehouse in Red Hook and 4 words on a phone at 3 in the morning. She thought about Marcus Bellini's face in the moment he understood. And then she let all of it go. Because the past 8 months were not the story. They were the foundation. And what came next was the story. Adrian found her at 10 o'clock and they left together, and in the car on the way back to the estate, he asked her what she had thought of Diana Hargrove, and she told him honestly that Diana was one of the sharpest people in that room, and that there were 2 potential areas of collaboration that would benefit both operations if handled correctly. And he listened to her describe them and asked 2 precise, structural questions, and she answered them, and by the time they reached the estate, they had the outline of something real. It was the most natural conversation they had ever had. They both noticed it at the same time, and neither of them said anything about it, but the noticing was there between them, warm and quiet, like a light left on in a room you've come back to. 6 months after Thursday, the New York underworld told a different story about the Valenti organization. Not loudly, not in public, but in the particular way that information moves through any closed system, through careful conversations and observed realities, and the gradual accumulation of evidence that something has fundamentally changed. The story was this. The Valenti organization was more stable than it had been in a decade. Its legitimate businesses were genuinely profitable, restructured with a precision that had eliminated the vulnerability Marcus had exploited for years. Its internal loyalty structure had been rebuilt on accountability rather than fear. People inside the organization knew that the rules were real and the consequences were real, and that the person who had built the system knew exactly how it worked at every level. The federal investigation into Gerald Fitch had resulted in his indictment on 11 counts of money laundering and financial fraud. Arthur Prentice had testified about the documentation. The case had moved through the legal system with the efficiency of evidence that was impossible to argue with. Charles Webb's parallel investigation into the Valenti organization had quietly narrowed its focus, not because the investigation had been compromised, but because the evidence no longer supported the specific theories it had been built around. Gerald Fitch was gone. Marcus Bellini was gone. The Calabrese connection was severed. The internal corruption had been systematically removed. What remained was an organization that functioned in ways that were harder to touch than what had come before. Patterson, the federal agent, called Evelyn's office phone on a Wednesday afternoon, 4 months after the dinner. She answered. "I want you to know," he said, without preamble, "that the Fitch case is going to conviction." The documentation was airtight. "I know," she said. A pause. "Mrs. Valenti," he said, "whatever you're doing over there, keep doing it." She was quiet for a moment. "That's an unusual thing for a federal agent to say," she said. "It's an unusual situation," he said. He hung up. She sat with the phone in her hand for a moment. Then she put it down and went back to work. On the evening of their first wedding anniversary, Adrian came to her office at 7 o'clock and stood in the doorway the way he had stood in doorways throughout all of this, taking up the frame with the particular presence of a man who had learned how to occupy space without filling it with noise. She looked up from her desk. "You're working," he said. "Always," she said. "It's our anniversary. I know what day it is." He came in and sat down across from her, the way he had sat down on the night she first showed him the folder, in the chair that had become his chair in this office in the months since, the chair that meant he was here to talk rather than to instruct or be instructed. "I want to ask you something," he said. She waited. "The night of the wedding," he said. "When we were standing at the altar and I told you not to make my life harder. You said you had no intention of doing that, I remember," she said. "Did you know then?" he said. "What you were going to do, what you were going to build?" She thought about it honestly. "I knew I was going to survive," she said. "I knew I was going to understand the ground I was standing on before I made any move. Beyond that, no, I didn't know." She paused. "I didn't know about Marcus. I didn't know about the financial architecture. I didn't know about any of the specifics. I just knew that I was not going to let this be done to me without doing something in return." He was quiet. "What do you think this was going to be?" she said. "In the beginning, when you agreed to the arrangement." He considered the question with the same honesty she had given him. "I thought it was going to be simple," he said. "A managed situation. A woman in the house who needed protecting and in return provided a certain kind of stability." He paused. "I thought I was the one who understood power in this arrangement. And now," she said. He looked at her. "Now I understand that power has nothing to do with who is loudest or most feared or most visibly in control," he said. "It has to do with who actually sees what is happening, who understands it, who can shape it." He held her gaze. "You saw everything from the first day. You shaped everything that followed. And you did it without anyone realizing it was happening until it was already done." She held his gaze steadily. "That is the only kind of power worth having," she said. "The kind that doesn't need to announce itself." He reached across the desk. She looked at his hand for a moment. Then she put hers in it. They sat like that, in the quiet of the office, in the house that had been a machine and had become something else entirely, something that had her fingerprints on every part of it in ways that no one could remove. Outside, the city moved the way it always moved. But inside this room, something had been built that was going to last. Evelyn Carter had walked into St. Patrick's Cathedral on a rainy morning in 1987 as a transaction, an instrument of debt settlement, a woman so invisible that the men around her could not conceive of her as a threat. She had walked out of the year that followed as the architect of an empire, not because she had been given power, not because someone had finally seen her and decided she deserved it. But because she had done the work, in the dark, in the silence, in the space that invisibility creates, with the specific patience of a woman who understood that the most dangerous move is always the one nobody sees coming. The heavyset bride no one respected had not become the mafia boss's deadliest ally. She had always been exactly that. The world had simply taken a year to catch up to what she already knew. And she had used every single day of that year to make sure that when it finally did, there was no going back.